Hot off the presses, Disney has decided to ditch Slack as their instant messenger tool of choice, and instead is moving with what they call an internal tool of choice that they're developing. Now, what has happened there? What exactly happened to make Disney shirk off? I don't know, just about every corporation's favorite instant messenger tool in favor of using something internal. And is there something afoot there that maybe there's some habits at play maybe you're also possess in your own pro coding habits? Are there any habits you're exuding that could actually be exposing risk to your company? Now, maybe your company's using Slack also. It could be the same risk. Or maybe they're not using Slack, but there's another tool they're using, and the same habits that caused Disney to decide to eschew Slack could be potentially putting your company at risk. All that we're going to cover in today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. Now, it's glad to see everybody here today, and I want to let you know that today's episode of the Pro Coder Show is sponsored by 12 Rules for Pro Coders. Coding is not just about writing if-then statements and designing classes and actually, writing the code. There's more to it than that. In fact, there's a lot more about it. Some of the most seasoned pros will tell you that writing the code is but a fraction of it. The thing is, there's a lot of lessons that you learn, whether it's you go to a comp sci university program or you're in some kind of 12-week boot camp program. But what I can promise you this is they had to cut stuff. They had to fit in the minimums. There's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of things I've learned through my career that were hard won, took a lot of effort, a lot of mistakes on my part, and I've done my best to distill those lessons into 12 rules for pro coders. So don't make the mistakes I made. Instead, go grab a copy at 12rules.io so you can leapfrog your career. Now let's jump over to it right away. Hot off the presses, Disney has decided to ditch Slack following a breach that happened earlier this summer in July. What happened exactly? Well, it turns out that a Disney employee was gaming. Now, were they gaming at work? I don't think so. What they were doing is they were on a personal device. Could have been laptop, desktop, what have you. They're on a personal device playing some kind of game. They probably had to download whatever. And actually, the game happened to have some form of Trojan horse. And then when you dig into the article, what you'll find out is that they ended up accessing one of their online password systems and to get into something. And then what happened is it unleashed an attack vector. So they went into their thing, and they were also linked up to Slack, their company stuff. So they were using a personal device and accessing a corporate system, whatever. And what happened was the tool, the attack vector was able to bridge the gap. Something that's revealed is that Disney happened in their Slack instance to have 10,000 channels. Now, some of the outrage on the internet is what kind of shop can operate with 10,000 channels? That's a fair question, but not one we're going to tackle in today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. Instead, I want to look at a thing here, because I did not find out about this by reading the news. As a pro coder, I'm not inclined to go read CNBC on a daily basis. Now, maybe if I was a business analyst, this would be more my cup of tea, but it's not. Instead, it was alerted to me by an article from this particular person. His name is Ted Neward, and I had the fortune to see him keynote a conference over 10 years ago in the Nashville area, and he's very compelling. So somebody to follow on LinkedIn and read his content. And it started from a different angle. At the top of his article, make sure we're zoomed up so you can see it. Let me zoom up like this so you can see it a little better, is Ted Neward writes, "People have mocked me for years, if not a decade or more, for carrying around multiple laptops." I can back up and say now, in this day and age, it's not uncommon for people to have a laptop. Back in 2010, when I had joined VMware to be a part of the Spring team, they offered me the option of laptop or desktop, and a lot of shops may do that. But a lot of the tech industry has been slowly moving to laptops because it's very portable. It's a lot easier to grab your laptop and go to the coffee shop down at the corner if you want to change the scenery, that kind of thing. That's fantastic. But what are you doing? Are you getting on there and are you going and checking on some of your banking stuff? Are you going and looking at your personal email? And then after about 20 minutes of that, you then hop over to your GitHub account to do something. You pull up Slack and you're chatting with your colleagues, and then you're getting onto whatever your ticket management tool is, if it's something else. And then are you accessing the expense reporting system? what I just covered was a whole cadre of things that as pro coders, we sit there and do. These are operations that we do in a given day. This is common fare. But did you notice something kind of subtle in there that Ted Neward's calling to a heel? It's the fact half of those things were personal tasks and half of those things were work tasks. And his whole point is he has what he calls an air-gapped environment. Now, I worked on a contract years ago that literally was air-gapped. The servers in production were racked and stacked and networked to each other, but nowhere was there a line that server room could reach the public internet we all know and love. It was a literal air-gapped environment. For us to bring a software release in, we either had to burn it to a CD or bring it in on a thumb drive. And they had a lot of security checks to watch thumb drives. So there are a lot of controls for air gapping. And what he's calling to attention here is that, are you separating your personal efforts and stuff with one machine and separating your work stuff with another? Now I'm just going to hold up here so you can get a glimpse of it. This show is being broadcast with my StreamYard account, and this is my personal MacBook Pro. It's quite nice. I like it. Very, very handy. Gets the job done. Fantastic. But I have another machine, and I have it over here. I have a different MacBook Pro, okay? Ironically, when I joined Cockroach Labs, they asked me, what do you want? Do you want the light one or the dark one? And I said, well, I'll try black. Why not? And maybe they actually auto-picked it for me, but I would have grabbed the black. And it's really this smoky color. And at that point, I actually was like, I need to keep those two separate. It just became an instinctive situation. Before I'd done this, I didn't have a personal laptop. But when I got noticed that I was going to not be continuing in the Broadcom acquisition, I said, I think it's time for me to get my own personal laptop. And, and Ted goes on to comment in his article. We can zoom out a little bit here. He meant, well, that's a little too zoomed out. You can't even read that. Let's do this. He says, look, I know it's convenient and easy to only have to walk around with one laptop, particularly if you're a tech speaker presenting at a conference. And I can sympathize with this because the week I've been here in New York City for Roach Fest and I've needed to bring my backpack from the hotel to the headquarters here to operate, I was like, gosh, this backpack's kind of heavy. I'm lugging around a lot of gear, right? And it was inconvenient, but I knew that I wanted to do that. And he's kind of saying the same thing. But many things can go wrong. And when they do, they can go catastrophically wrong in a hurry. And he is not kidding. Forget IP concerns on a foreign network. And here he very carefully defines what we mean by foreign network. This is not your home network, not your employer's network. There's a lot of potential vectors to attack you that could get you and your company into deep waters. Okay. If you I talked earlier about go to the local coffee shop. What if you get on their Wi-Fi? What if you do that? And you're doing some gaming stuff and then you're connecting to corporate resources. There's a lot of potential vectors to attack that could get you and the company into deep waters. And admit it, how many of you knew that running a game while having Slack open was a potential attack vector? I'll raise my hand and say, I did not know that was possible, but we need to all be aware that these attack vectors we don't know what they are. It is every time I talk to security experts, I realize I am not a security expert. I cannot comprehend some of these ways that they maneuver stuff. Ted goes on to write in his post, most of my gaming takes place on either my desktop machine or my mobile devices. I have a specific device that I'll connect to a work network like email, Slack, Teams, whatever, corporate assets that you're reaching, that I'm comfortable with the company remote wiping if necessary. If your company detects a breach, they're going to want to wipe resources. Do you want your own personal data on that machine if that's the situation? Are you willing to take that risk on? And then he goes on to say, if necessary, if they need to wipe it if necessary, and it's not the device that has a phone number that my friends call me at. I have a laptop that I use for my personal work development, and I will never present at a conference from a work laptop unless it's an internal work conference. That's a pretty staunch position there, Because the other thing is when you go to a tech conference, that's not your network. That's not your company's network unless your company is hosting the event. That is somebody else's network, probably, and it's even if you're going to a hotel, hotels may have some element of security. I wouldn't bet the farm on that. But a lot of times for tech events, they actually pay a provider to come in and stand up a special network. So now we're talking a very unknown network that you're done. So he says he builds a big Chinese wall, as they used to call it, between your work and your personal electronic life and air gap them for best results. Now, I hope you're thinking, if you're feeling a tension of, gosh, that sounds like it makes sense and it sounds brutally inconvenient. That's true. That is true. This thing that I'm presenting from doing the live stream, I have a password management service that I use for managing all my family's personal passwords, banking, what have you. In fact, somebody else that I follow in the tech community had just recently posted that somebody had hacked their bank account. And so they're having to go tackle all that stuff. Well, do you know what doesn't get into my personal password system? This machine. This machine does not have access to that. Okay. There's times when my personal laptop is closed. It's not even in front of me. Sometimes it's in another room or it's in my backpack stowed away, and I'm on this machine. And somebody asked me a question. My wife needs to ping me on what's her business's bank account balance, because she needs to go purchase something for her business, and she wants me to do a quick check. And I'm like, at first, the first couple of times when I got two machines, it was inconvenient because okay, I got to get off the work machine and I got to go find my other machine and get on it. The first couple of times that was inconvenient, but then I realized, hold on, that's the way I want it to be. I need to switch off doing. Either I need to make a choice at that point in time. I either need to say, okay, I can pause work and I can go do this personal task, or I can say, can I do that later? Maybe I'll do that at lunchtime. Would that be okay? That kind of thing. So it forces me to actually switch my mental state from being on the work or switching to a personal task. And there's no problem with, well, I need to go do this task. I'm being asked to do something. Not in this example, I said go look up a bank balance. But what if there's a task you need to do? It's going to take you 30 minutes, and it's a personal task you need to carry out. I have no problem going to my teammates with my work computer and saying, look, I'm going to be AFK for like 30 minutes or something. I'm going to be off of here and I need to go deal with something. Okay. And you're like, okay, well, see then. In this day and age, people are cool with that. That's no problem. So, and Ted Neward wraps it up with saying, yes, it makes for a heavier backpack and it's a more interesting time at airport security. That is very true. But weigh that against being the Disney employee below and decide for yourself which is the worst outcome. I don't know the outcome for the Disney employee that is tied to the breach that happened. I don't know what their policies are. I don't know if they got a pat on the head and said, sorry, it happened that way. I have no idea if they were reprimanded, fired, disciplined. I don't know about that. And for what we're talking about today, it's irrelevant. The point is, I don't want to shoulder the burden that I caused some kind of breach like that because I took a shortcut. Now, one of the questions you may ask yourself is, what does it cost to do that? What does it cost to have a personal machine and a work machine? Okay. So, this work machine is corporate asset. This is provided by my company. Very convenient. I appreciate them providing me a very nice asset to work with. But when have I had personal machines? And if I go back, and this is my story, yours may be similar or very different. When I was in the university program, all the stuff that I was doing, we had engineering labs. And interestingly enough, none of my assignments were for either a PC or a Mac back in the day. Instead, they had Sun workstations in engineering labs, and that's what I used. Okay. So I went there and worked. So at no point when I was in college did I feel compelled to go buy a computer, which to me, by the time I graduated college, felt ironic. Hey, look, I've studied 6 years of computer science and engineering, and I don't even own a computer. That sounds kind of, counterintuitive. the first job that I went to, and you can go look me up on LinkedIn to see where I went to first after I graduated. They gave me a machine. They had a machine with a particular version of Windows on it. It had corporate software on it. It had the version of Windows the sysadmins wanted on it, because they're the ones on the hook to make sure they're using patch systems. So at that point in time, I had a corporate machine, and I would come home at the end of the day and I was like, I don't know, I'm not that interested in doing computer stuff right now. I just did that all day. I want to take a break and do something else. But at a certain point, I was like, well, there's some things here and there I want to do. So I eventually went to get a machine. And then it was like, I don't know, maybe I'll build a machine or something, whether or not I'm going to put Windows on it, or maybe I want to build it for Linux. But I build a cheap thing, something inexpensive. Later on, I got into something called Myth TV, which is open source personal video recorder. It's basically a TiVo box you can build yourself. And I had a lot of fun assembling that. But I didn't have anything like my own Mac until last year. VMware, as it was going through the process of the acquisition, for the final 3 months when it was still VMware and not Broadcom, they issued a bonus to everybody. It was a partial bonus. And so I was very appreciative of that. I put the money in the bank. And then the day after I'd gotten the notice that I wasn't going to be in Broadcom from there on, my wife looked at me and says, I think you need to get that personal machine. I talked about getting a personal machine for doing video editing and YouTube production and live streaming, etc., but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger on that. But when she said that to me, it clicked. I said, yeah, you're right. I need to go get that. And it turns out I went and got a MacBook Pro, and I said, this is a machine I want to use. I want to invest in this machine so I can invest in the channel and make content for you. And I remember chatting with my friend Josh Long on Twitter earlier that year. He had gotten a new MacBook Pro of his own, a personal MacBook Pro. And I had asked him, Josh, how many cores did you get? And his answer was, all of them. So I went on the Apple website. I picked M3 Max. I picked all the cores, and I got the biggest screen space I could get. And then from there, it was like, okay, how much? Okay, let me upgrade the hard drive a little bit. And so basically, that entire bonus check went in to build this machine. So it felt like a lot of money at that point in time. But from that day forward, from the day forward that it was in my hands, I knew I could grab this laptop. I could shoot a video, whether I'm using the camera or this thing. I could stream with no effort. I could edit the video with no effort. And I could render it in what I call real time. A 5-minute video would render in 5 minutes, a 10-minute video in 10 minutes. And I had seen stuff where a 10-minute video would take an hour to render. And I realized that was the right investment. I wanted to have something where it does the job I need it to do, and I don't have to think about the hardware. And it was a similar reasoning when I bought my wife's first lap, when I upgraded her from a cheap netbook I would buy at Costco and instead bought her a MacBook Air that was fully leaded. That kind of thing where you pour a little bit, it's a little bit of money up front, but when you realize, hey, I can probably get 10 years out of this machine because it has so much oomph. Just take whatever cost you pour into it and divide by 10. And it's like, hey, that's actually not such a bad deal anymore. So this is where you have to ask yourself, what do I need to do to invest in myself? I'm going to be a pro coder. What is something that helps me do that? On other episodes of the show, I've talked about carve out a space to work at, where a dedicated workstation area. It doesn't have to be a fancy piece of furniture. It needs to be an area that when I sit down here, I am coding. I am doing the pro coding here. It's a mental thing. And a piece of that is, do you need a personal machine to be able to have your personal stuff and then whatever your company is going to provide to you? You can have them next to each other. You can swap when you need to. I do that sometimes. So that's the kind of investment you need to do in yourself, because we can talk about all the silver bullets and all the assets out there and all the tools, but the most important asset in your book as a pro coder is yourself. The more books you can read, nudge, nudge, there's a new book you can get from me. There's books you can read, tutorials you can take, videos you can watch. I've tried make lots of content here. And one of the things is I realized I've kind of slipped behind on making episodes of the Pro Coder Show. We've been really busy on Cockroach Labs building training for our paying customers, but I want to circle back and get back into doing the show. So we'll see how that flies. So I'm super excited to be working on that. But in all this stuff, it's important to remember your most important investment is yourself. So think about that and think about what that means to you. So I want to thank you for turning up for today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. And I want you to remember to go out there and be professional.
This episode is over, but your code writing journey continues. Visit procoder.io to find links and resources to help you become a pro coder.